United States Polo Association. The United States Polo Association (USPA) is the national governing body for the sport of polo in the United States. Introduction. Established in 1890 by David Grubbs, the USPA provides resources to over 4,500 individual members and 250 polo clubs across the U.S. and Canada, including promoting the game of polo, coordinating the activities of its member clubs and registered players, arranging and supervising polo tournaments, competitions and games, and providing rules, handicaps and conditions for those tournaments, competitions and games, including the safety and welfare. The USPA has established a number of programs for new players to learn the sport in the U.S., including regional polo centers and clubs that host schools and lessons across the country, and Pony Club. In 2012, 60 Minutes aired a special feature on polo's resurgence in America and included several interviews with dedicated players and ambassadors in the United States. The segment highlighted one of the USPA's specialty programs, Work to Ride, www.worktoride.net, which is dedicated to helping inner-city youth in Philadelphia through polo and other equine activities. Brand. The U.S. Polo Association. Brand is managed by USPA Properties, Inc., a wholly owned subsidiary of the U.S. Polo Association. Chairman. History 1890–2018. Polo was first played in the United States in 1876, introduced by James Gordon Bennett, Jr. May 10, 1841 – May 14, 1918, who had first observed the game played in England. Bennett came to be known as the father of American polo, as it was he who assembled the players' knowledge, equipment, and Texas horses to play the first loosely structured matches in the United States. During that winter of 1876, the first game was held indoors. Westchester alternated seasons between New York City and Newport, Rhode Island, before making Newport its permanent home. On May 13, 1876, the Jerome Park Racetrack in Westchester County, future home of the New York Giants baseball team and hence the name Polo Grounds, was the site of the first outdoor polo match. Then, in 1879, Meadowbrook became a polo club and began play on the Mineola Fairgrounds of Long Island. The foundation had now been. Players and teams proliferated. The development of the sport demanded a governing body. The Polo Association, later known as the United States Polo Association, with H. L. Herbert serving as first chairman, was founded March 21, 1890. The USPA's purpose was to coordinate games, standardize rules, and establish handicaps. Mr. Herbert was credited with instituting a handicapping system in 1888 so that teams could be more evenly matched. The first USPA headquarters was appropriately located in New York, the center of polo at that time. The association began operations on a voluntary basis of committee structure and continues as such today, with a small office staff. Elected officers and governors serve annually along with appointed committee members. USPA membership originally included 7 clubs, and, the following year, 142 players registered, and there were 5 new clubs. In its early days of organization, the association initiated changes in the number and length of time periods chukkers in a match. Equipment became standardized, and pony training improved significantly. Scoring was also adjusted to allow for fractioning of points for penalties, later abolished as an unnecessarily complex method of scoring that was in 1904. Another important tournament evolved, the United States Open. The first Open was won by the Wanderers, who scored 4-1/2 to the Freebooters 3. The tournament resumed in 1910 and continued every year with the exception of 1911, 1915, 1917, 1918, and 1942–1945. The U.S. Open Polo Championship would become polo's most prestigious tournament, still played annually and most. The excitement of the sport was contagious. Many of the early polo matches in the 1920s and 1930s attracted as many as 20,000 spectators. This would be an impressive attendance even by today's standards. Yet, when one considers the communication and transportation capabilities of that era, it was truly incredible. The center of much of this excitement was Meadowbrook Polo Club in Westbury, NY, the site of many of the first U.S. Open and Westchester Cup championships. During these early years of the USPA, one of the more famous players in polo was Foxhall Keene, handicapped for 14 years at 10 goals, and then 16 years at 9 goals. Though there were many other greats, 4 players stood out in the 1890s and early 1920s. By 1913, Circuit Cup play began with the first USPA Inter-Circuit Cup held in 1916. The USPA claimed 1407 members and began registration of the ponies as well, though pony registration would later be dropped in the 1920s. College polo came of age and indoor polo grew in popularity, championed by George Sherman and Robert A. Gravis. Contributing to the growth of polo during this period was the U.S. Army, who after joining the USPA, polo's greatest era began in the years between the First and Second World Wars. The sport not only survived the Great Depression, but expanded into the 1930s with increased international competition. The number of registered clubs had increased to 88 and playing membership was 2889, of which 1276 were military players. Louis Stoddard, a 10-goal player and member of 2 Westchester Cup championship teams, served as chairman from 1922 to by 1928. Another international match, the Cup of the Americas, was initiated between highly rated teams from the U.S. and Argentina. The U.S. team won the first 2 competitions, however. From 1936, Argentina would go on to be the victor in future matches. The 1930s also saw women creating an impact on the sport, though they would not become official USPA members for years to come. During polo's heyday, it was only fitting that Hollywood would become involved with this great sport. With a wonderful climate for the game and the appeal for movie stars and moguls, California polo expanded. The geographic spread of polo led to the first East-West matchup in 1933, with the West winning 2 of 3 matches, proving the Westerners were a force with which to be reckoned. Humorist Will Rogers, a talented player and supporter of polo, was thrilled. The Great Depression eventually took its toll on the fabric of American society, and polo, like most things, faced some dire times. As World War II began, the number of civilian players dropped from 1,600 to 750. Polo survived after the war, thanks in great part to Cecil Smith of Plano, Texas, considered one of the first professional or paid players. By 1950, the number of active clubs was 56, with 614 USPA playing members. DeVeru Milburn, Jr., son of the great 10-goal star, served as chairman of the association from 1950 to 1960. The early 1950s also marked the closing of Meadowbrook to make way for a highway. Meadowbrook, a new star was on the horizon. Oak Brook in Chicago, Illinois, when the first U.S. Open was played there in the 1950s. In 1970, the association listed 100 clubs and 917 registered players. Northrop R. Knox would head the USPA from 1966 to 1970, followed by William Ilvasaker 1970-1975 and Hugo Dalmer, Jr. 1975-1976. The early 1970s brought about increased popularity in polo's major tournaments and in the club ranks. Polo flourished in Florida. Polo evolved from a society sport to include a far broader base of budget-minded horsemen, Professional players and commercial sponsorship. In 1986, the United States Polo Association moved its national headquarters to a more central location in the heart of thoroughbred country. Lexington, pride, and spectator interest were at a high point, particularly after the 1989 Federation of International Polo World Championship in West Berlin, Germany. 8 teams from all over the world battled, with the U.S. team riding away as the victor over Britain in the final match. Led by Chairman John, the USPA completed 2 major strategic planning efforts 2005 and 2011 that resulted in many new and innovative programs and services that were designed to grow and sustain the sport. The establishment of a professional leadership staff was a main objective of the strategic planning sessions. Polo continues to grow stronger, with current membership exceeding 4,500 members, many of whom are women players. Over 250 clubs and intercollegiate